The party was small, just the way Andrew liked it. Balloons swayed lazily in the humid New Orleans air, and the scent of freshly baked cake mingled with the faint aroma of jasmine from the garden. Andrew's friends were laughing, their voices rising and falling like the rhythm of a jazz tune. I stood by the kitchen counter, watching him beam as he tore through the wrapping paper on his gifts. His joy was infectious, and for a moment I allowed myself to believe that everything was perfect. But perfection is a fragile thing, and I should have known better than to trust it. Kimberly arrived late, as she always did, carrying a small, brightly colored envelope. Her smile was tight, her eyes scanning the room like she was taking inventory of everything she wasn't a part of. "Happy birthday, Andrew," she said, handing him the card. Her tone was sweet, but I caught the edge beneath it, the subtle bitterness that had lingered between us for years. Andrew, oblivious to the tension, took the card eagerly, his small hands fumbling with the seal. "Thanks, Aunt Kim," he chirped, his voice full of innocence. I watched as he opened the envelope, his fingers pulling out the card with the kind of excitement only a 9-year-old could muster. The card was simple, with a cartoon dinosaur on the front and glitter that sparkled under the light. Andrew's smile widened as he read the printed message inside. But then, something changed. His face fell, his hands trembled slightly, and the fork he'd been holding clattered to the floor. The sound was sharp, cutting through the laughter and chatter like a knife. Everyone turned to look, but Andrew didn't notice. He was frozen, staring at the card as if it had whispered something terrible to him. "Andrew, honey, are you okay?" I asked, my voice steady despite the knot tightening in my chest. He didn't answer. His eyes darted to me, wide and glassy, before he shoved the card into his pocket and muttered something about needing to use the bathroom. He bolted from the room before I could stop him, leaving an awkward silence in his wake. Kimberly raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a faint smirk. "Kids," she said, shrugging as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I knew her. I excused myself and followed Andrew, my heart pounding with a mix of worry and anger. I found him in his room, sitting on the edge of his bed with the card clutched tightly in his hands. "Andrew, what's wrong?" I asked gently, kneeling in front of him. He shook his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I don't understand, Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "What does this mean?" He handed me the card, and as I read the handwritten note scrawled beneath the printed message, my blood ran cold. It was Kimberly's handwriting, unmistakable in its sharp, angular strokes. The words were simple but devastating. "Ask your mom about your dad. She's been lying to you." My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment the room seemed to tilt. I looked at Andrew, his tear-streaked face filled with confusion and hurt, and I felt something inside me shatter. Kimberly had crossed a line, one I didn't even know she was capable of crossing, and now I had to pick up the pieces. I hugged Andrew tightly, whispering reassurances I wasn't sure I believed. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll talk about it, I promise. But not here, not now." He nodded against my shoulder, his small body trembling. As I held him, my mind raced. Kimberly had always been difficult, but this was something else entirely. This was deliberate, this was cruel, and I needed to find out why. When I returned to the party, Kimberly was sipping a glass of wine, her expression smug. I walked straight up to her, my voice low but firm. "What the hell were you thinking?" I hissed. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but the glint in her eyes told me otherwise. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I couldn't. Not here, not in front of Andrew. So I swallowed my anger and walked away, vowing to deal with her later. For now, my priority was Andrew, and the truth I'd been trying so hard to protect him from. The night after the party was restless. Andrew had finally fallen asleep, but I couldn't. I sat in the dim light of the living room, the card resting on the coffee table like a ticking time bomb. My hands trembled as I picked it up again, reading Kimberly's words over and over. Each time, they cut deeper, reopening wounds I thought I'd buried long ago. I had spent years building a life for Andrew, shielding him from the truth, and now, with a few careless words, Kimberly had torn it all apart. I thought back to the day Andrew's father left. It was a rainy afternoon in New Orleans, the kind of day that felt heavy with unspoken goodbyes. He had packed his bags without a word, leaving behind nothing but a note that said, I can't do this. I had cried for weeks, mourning not just the man I loved, but the future we'd planned together. When Andrew was born, I promised myself I'd give him the life he deserved, even if it meant rewriting the past. I told him his father had died in an accident, a lie that felt kinder than the truth. And for 9 years, that lie had been enough. But Kimberly had always known the truth. She had been there when it all fell apart, her resentment simmering beneath the surface. I had tried to keep her at arm's length, but family ties are hard to sever. She had always found a way back in, her presence a constant reminder of the life I was trying to leave behind. And now, she had used that knowledge to hurt me in the most personal way possible. I couldn't understand why. What did she stand to gain from this? The next morning, Andrew was quiet. He picked at his breakfast, his usual chatter replaced by a heavy silence. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked finally, his voice small. I nodded, my heart sinking. We sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the window casting long shadows across his face. "Why did Aunt Kim say that?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "Why would she say you're lying about Dad?" I took a deep breath, my hands gripping the edge of the table. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. "Andrew," I began, my voice trembling, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." His eyes widened, and I saw the fear in them, the same fear I felt. "Your dad, he's not dead. He left us when you were a baby. I didn't tell you because I wanted to protect you. I didn't want you to feel like you weren't enough." The words hung in the air, heavy and painful. Andrew stared at me, his expression a mix of shock and betrayal. "You lied to me," he said finally, his voice breaking. "All this time, you lied." Tears streamed down his face, and I reached for him, but he pulled away. "I'm sorry, Andrew. I thought I was doing the right thing," I said, my own tears falling. "I never wanted to hurt you." But my words felt hollow, and I knew they couldn't undo the damage that had been done. He ran to his room, slamming the door behind him, and I was left alone with the weight of my choices. I wanted to blame Kimberly, to make her the villain in this story. But deep down, I knew the truth. This was my fault. I had made the decision to lie, to build our lives on a foundation of half-truths and omissions. And now, that foundation was crumbling. I needed to make things right, but I didn't know how. All I knew was that I couldn't lose Andrew. He was my world, and I would do whatever it took to fix this. The hours after Andrew locked himself in his room felt like an eternity. I sat on the couch, staring at the closed door, my mind racing with every possible way to fix this. I wanted to knock, to beg him to let me in, but I knew he needed space. The truth had hit him like a tidal wave, and I couldn't blame him for wanting to shut me out. I had spent years weaving a story to protect him, but now that story had unraveled, leaving us both drowning in its wake. Kimberly's betrayal burned in the back of my mind. I replayed the scene at the party over and over, dissecting every glance, every smirk. She had planned this. There was no other explanation. But why? What did she gain from exposing the truth in such a cruel way? I thought about confronting her again, but the thought of her smug face made my stomach churn. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about Andrew and the pieces of his world that I needed to put back together. I finally knocked on his door, my hand trembling. "Andrew, sweetheart, can we talk?" I asked softly. There was no response, just the faint sound of him shifting on his bed. "I know you're upset, and you have every right to be, but I need you to know that I love you more than anything. Everything I've done, every decision I've made, was because I thought it was best for you." My voice cracked, and I pressed my forehead against the door, willing him to understand. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open. Andrew stood there, his eyes red and puffy, his small frame looking even smaller in the dim light. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "Did you think I couldn't handle it?" I knelt down to his level, my heart breaking at the pain in his eyes. "I didn't want you to feel abandoned," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought if I told you he was gone, you wouldn't have to carry the weight of wondering why he left. But now I do," he said, his voice rising. "Now I have to wonder why he didn't want me, why he didn't stay." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I reached for him, but he stepped back. "I'm sorry, Andrew. I can't change what I did. But I can promise you this. I'll never lie to you again. No more secrets, no more half-truths. You deserve better than that." He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable before nodding slowly. "Okay," he said quietly, "but I want to know everything." We spent the next hour sitting on his bed, the card lying between us like a silent witness. I told him about his father, about the man I had loved and lost. I told him about the day he left, about the note he left behind, and about the years I spent trying to pick up the pieces. I didn't sugarcoat it, and I didn't hold back. Andrew deserved the truth, even if it hurt. By the time I finished, the weight in my chest felt lighter, but the look in Andrew's eyes told me the road ahead wouldn't be easy. That night, as I tucked him into bed, he looked up at me with a question that stopped me in my tracks. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" he asked, his voice small. I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said finally. "But no matter what happens, you'll always have me. And I'll always have you." He nodded, his eyes closing as he drifted off to sleep. I sat by his side for a long time, watching him breathe, and silently vowed to never let him feel alone again. The next morning, I called Kimberly. My hands shook as I dialed her number, my anger bubbling just beneath the surface. She answered on the second ring, her voice dripping with false cheer. "Michelle, what a surprise," she said, as if she hadn't just detonated a bomb in my life. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold. "Now." She sighed dramatically but agreed to meet me at a cafe downtown. As I hung up, I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Andrew, and I wasn't going to let her hurt him again. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the faint hum of jazz playing softly in the background. Kimberly was already there, sitting at a corner table with her phone in hand, scrolling with an air of indifference. She looked up as I approached, her expression unreadable but guarded. "Michelle," she said, her tone neutral, almost bored. "What's this about?" I slid into the chair across from her, my hands clenched into fists beneath the table. "You know exactly what this is about," I said, my voice low and steady, though my anger simmered just beneath the surface. Kimberly leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms with a faint smirk playing on her lips. "If this is about the card, I was just trying to help," she said, her voice dripping with false innocence. "Andrew deserves to know the truth, don't you think?" Her words were like gasoline poured over a fire, igniting the rage I had been trying to contain. "You had no right," I said through gritted teeth, my voice trembling with restrained fury. "That was my decision to make, not yours. You don't get to waltz into our lives and tear everything apart just because you're bitter." Her smirk faltered for a brief moment, and I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a defensive glare. "Bitter?" she repeated, her voice rising with indignation. "You think this is about me being bitter? You've been lying to that boy his whole life, Michelle. I did what you didn't have the guts to do." Her words were sharp, cutting into me like a blade, but I refused to let her see how deeply they hurt. "You didn't do this for Andrew," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. "You did this to hurt me. And congratulations, it worked. But you didn't just hurt me, Kimberly. You hurt him, and that's something I'll never forgive you for." Kimberly's jaw tightened, and she looked away, her gaze fixed on the window as if she couldn't bear to meet my eyes. "You think you're so perfect," she muttered, her voice laced with years of unspoken resentment. "Always playing the victim, always acting like you're better than me. Well, guess what? You're not. You're just as flawed as the rest of us." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of our shared history. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. Kimberly had made her choice, and so had I. The only thing that mattered now was Andrew. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the floor, and stood up. "This is the last time you interfere in our lives," I said, my voice cold and final. "If you ever pull something like this again, you won't be a part of Andrew's life. Do you understand me?" Kimberly didn't respond. Her eyes remained fixed on the table, her expression unreadable. I waited for a moment, hoping for some sign of remorse, but none came. Finally, I turned and walked away, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and relief. I had said what I needed to say, And now, it was up to her to decide what kind of person she wanted to be. When I got home, Andrew was waiting for me in the living room, his sketchbook resting on his lap. He looked up as I walked in, his expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Did you talk to her?" he asked, his voice tentative, as if he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. I nodded, sitting down beside him on the couch. "I did," I said, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, "and she won't be causing any more trouble." He leaned against me, his small body warm and comforting. "Thanks, Mom," he said softly, "for telling me the truth." I hugged him tightly, my heart swelling with love and determination. We had a long road ahead, but we would face it together. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the day played over and over in my mind. I thought about Kimberly's words, about the years of resentment that had finally boiled over. I thought about Andrew, about the questions he would have, the challenges we would face together. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. The truth had come out, and while it had been painful, it had also been liberating. We were stronger than the lies, stronger than the past, and no matter what came next, I knew we would face it together. The next morning, Andrew seemed lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his small shoulders. He sat at the kitchen table, sketching a new drawing, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What are you working on?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of coffee. He held up the paper, a proud smile on his face. It was a picture of the two of us standing side by side, smiling. In the background, there was a faint outline of a man, his face obscured. "That's Dad," Andrew explained. "I don't know what he looks like, but I wanted him to be there." Tears filled my eyes as I looked at the drawing. It was a reminder that no matter what, Andrew still carried hope in his heart. "It's beautiful," I said, pulling him into a hug. "Just like you." He beamed, and in that moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. We couldn't change the past, but we could build a future together, one filled with love and honesty. Later that day, as I watched Andrew play in the backyard, I thought about Kimberly. I wondered if she regretted what she had done, if she understood the pain she had caused. Part of me wanted to call her, to try to mend the broken pieces of our relationship. But another part of me knew that some wounds take time to heal, and some relationships are better left at a distance. For now, my focus was on Andrew and the life we were building together. As the sun set over New Orleans, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a quiet sense of gratitude. Gratitude for Andrew, for his resilience and his love. Gratitude for the truth, even though it had been painful. And gratitude for the chance to start over, to build something stronger and more honest. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. The days that followed felt like a delicate balancing act, as if Andrew and I were walking a tightrope stretched over the chasm of our past. He was quieter than usual, his questions coming in small bursts when he felt brave enough to ask. I answered each one honestly, no matter how much it hurt. "Why did Dad leave?" he asked one evening, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. He wasn't ready to be a father," I said finally, my heart breaking all over again. "But that doesn't mean it was your fault. It was never your fault." Andrew nodded, but I could see the doubt lingering in his eyes. I wanted to reach inside his mind and erase every trace of guilt, every question that made him wonder if he wasn't enough. Instead, I hugged him tightly, hoping my love could fill the void his father had left behind. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me," I whispered into his hair. "Don't ever forget that." He didn't say anything, but the way he clung to me told me he understood, at least for now. Kimberly, true to her word, or perhaps out of guilt, kept her distance. I didn't hear from her after our confrontation at the cafe, and for that, I was grateful. But her absence didn't erase the damage she'd done. The card still sat in Andrew's desk drawer, a silent reminder of the truth we couldn't escape. I thought about throwing it away, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the knowledge that we couldn't run from the past, no matter how much we wanted to. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the New Orleans sky in shades of orange and pink, Andrew came to me with the card in his hand. "Mom," he said, his voice steady but soft, "can we talk about Dad again?" I nodded, my heart heavy but ready. We sat on the porch, the warm breeze carrying the scent of magnolias, and I told him everything about how we met, how we fell in love, and how it all fell apart. I didn't sugarcoat it, but I didn't dwell on the pain either. I wanted him to know the truth, but I also wanted him to see the love that had existed before it all went wrong. "Do you think he ever thinks about me?" Andrew asked, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The question hit me like a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to answer. "I don't know," I admitted. "But if he does, I hope he knows how amazing you are. Because you are, Andrew. You're incredible." He looked at me then, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and sadness that made my chest ache. "Thanks, Mom," he said quietly, "for telling me." As the weeks turned into months, Andrew began to heal. The questions came less frequently, and his laughter slowly returned. He started drawing again, filling his sketchbook with colorful scenes of dinosaurs and superheroes. I watched him one afternoon, his brow furrowed in concentration, as he worked on a new drawing. "What are you making?" I asked, leaning over his shoulder. He grinned, holding up the paper. "It's us," he said. The drawing showed the two of us standing side by side, smiling. In the background, there was a faint outline of a man, his face obscured. "That's Dad," Andrew explained. "I don't know what he looks like, but I wanted him to be there." Tears filled my eyes as I looked at the drawing. It was a reminder that no matter what, Andrew still carried hope in his heart. "It's beautiful," I said, pulling him into a hug. "Just like you." He beamed, and in that moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. We couldn't change the past, but we could build a future together, one filled with love and honesty. One day, as I was cleaning out the attic, I stumbled across an old box of letters. They were from Andrew's father, written before he left. I hadn't been able to bring myself to read them back then, the pain too fresh, but now I felt a strange sense of curiosity. I opened the first letter, the paper yellowed with age, and began to read. His words were filled with regret, with love, and with fear. He had been scared, overwhelmed by the weight of fatherhood, and he had run. But there was one line that stood out. "Tell Andrew I'm sorry. Tell him I love him." I sat there for a long time, the letter clutched in my hands. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to bury the past once and for all. But another part of me knew that Andrew deserved to see it. That night, I showed him the letter. His hands trembled as he read it, his eyes scanning the words over and over. "He loved me," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "He really loved me." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "He did, sweetheart. He did." The letter became a turning point for Andrew. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave him something he hadn't had before: closure. He started asking fewer questions about his father, focusing instead on the life we were building together. We planted a garden in the backyard, filling it with bright flowers and vegetables. We took trips to the park, laughing as we raced each other to the swings. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the fireflies dance in the twilight, Andrew turned to me with a smile. "Mom, I think we're going to be okay," he said. His words were simple, but they carried a weight that brought tears to my eyes. "Yeah," I said, pulling him close. "We are." In that moment, I realized that the truth, no matter how painful, had set us free. We were stronger now, bound not by lies, but by love and trust. Kimberly never apologized, but I didn't need her to. I had let go of my anger, choosing instead to focus on the life Andrew and I were building. The card, the letters, the pain, they were all part of our story, but they didn't define us. We were more than the sum of our scars. We were a family, imperfect but whole, and that was all that mattered. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Andrew rested his head on my shoulder. "I love you, Mom," he said, his voice soft but steady. I kissed the top of his head, my heart swelling with love. "I love you too, Andrew. Always." And in that moment, I knew we had found our way back to each other. The road ahead might not be easy, but we would face it together, one step at a time.